with a falsehood, you're faced with two options. You can accept it or you can reject it. The basis upon which we take one of these actions is a product of our critical thinking capabilities and a desire to know what is true instead of confirming our bias. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. On Brainstorm, we choose the hard truths over the comforting lies. Reason, compassion, skepticism. This is the Brainstorm Podcast.
Hey folks, welcome to the Brainstorm Podcast Skeptic Studio. In this episode, I talked to Jared Holt, who writes about various far-right figures for the website Right Wing Watch. Jared has been one of the main people covering the far-right online recently and was recommended to me as one of the best by a previous guest, David Nywert. I find Jared's approach to be very fair, but he doesn't pull punches. He also has a podcast called Shitpost, which I will provide links for in the show notes. Remember that if you have any feedback on this or any episode, then you can reach me by email at mail@brainstormblog.net or by hitting the contact button on our website, brainstormblog.net. If you'd like what we do on Brainstorm, then make sure to share the show around and give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podknife, or Podchaser, or you can also support us on patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. And now I'm going to send you over to my chat with Jared Holt right after this promo for another podcast.
Are you done getting your brain stormed?
We here at Packard Pokesat, we poke at beliefs, religion, news, and oddities from across the web.
Join us, along with occasional guest hosts from people in the secular atheist movement,
Where we poke at all of this and more Friday nights.
at vaughnlive.tv/Packard Pokesat.
Okay, Connie, are we done with this promo?
Well, how are they supposed to find us, Packard?
Oh, shit. I forgot about that. I know. They can find us using a compass.
No, that won't work.
Well, they can find us at Packard Pokesat at WordPress.com. Where can they find us? Well, they
all
can...
the way back to Newark.
All the way back in Newark. Well, they can find us. They can find us at Packard Pokesat on packardpokesat.wordpress.com, Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, and YouTube.
Just don't try the magic 8-ball.
Yeah, I know. I tried that last week, but all I got was, try again later.
All right, welcome to the Brainstorm Podcast Skeptic Studio. Today I'm talking to Jared Holt from Right Wing Watch. I was talking to David Nywert a few months ago, and he recommended a few names as to who are people doing good work in reporting on the far right, and your name came up.
Well, it's an honor. David is a legend,
right,
covering this stuff, and to be considered worthy by him is truly an honor. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I guess a good place to start is just a little bit of your background. How did you get into journalism and eventually writing about the far right?
Yeah, so I got into journalism because I've had a passion for photography through my whole life, and was on the yearbook staff at high school, and was doing photos for a college newspaper, and after doing photos, one of the editors asked me to write a story, and sort of got the hang of it, and enjoyed the writing component to it as well, and I thought politics was fun to cover, and that's sort of how I got into journalism. How I got into this stuff. So my first job out of college was at a place called Media Matters, and there I was listening to conservative talk radio and watching Fox News and stuff. and God bless the folks over there doing that work. But after I've been doing that for, I guess, about a year or so, I felt that, at that time, this was around like 2015. This is like sort of in the fallout of Gamergate. The primaries are going. Like there was something bad happening on the internet. Something very bad. These online communities that, as a freshman in college or even in high school that I would go on to, read edgy jokes or whatever and have a laugh. Like it was all shifting and getting very political all of a sudden.
Right.
And, people weren't really writing about that, or at least not very many people were writing about that. So after complaining for a little bit, I decided I was going to write about that.
Somebody has to do it, eh?
Yeah. Like, someone's got to do the dirty work. So, if I can't convince someone else, I guess I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
And, when I was doing that, I was, doing a ton of research, ton of studying on sort of how information travels across social media, how Pizzagate started with a random like Facebook comment,
right.
and all along the way, what do you know? There's a bunch of like insane far right like white nationalists all over the place. So I, when doing that work, I had to sort of educate myself and in order to understand what I was looking at and be able to write about it in a way that made sense, I had to, familiarize myself with the white nationalist scene in the United States and see, how they interact online.
Right. So I guess, what are your own kind of politics? Like, I don't want to, so that you're not considered a far left extremist yourself, right? You're not just putting out propaganda to discredit these ideas because they're good.
Oh no. All these guys seem to think that I'm like Antifa, and while I'm not a fan of fascist ideology, I'm certainly not going to throw a mask on and get out in the street. I'd rather just write about it and let people read what I write and have their own takeaways from it.
Right.
But I come from my personal politics are progressive, and I don't pretend to try to be neutral. I feel like it's more honest for me to just be upfront with like the bias I have.
Okay.
And then, however people want to read into that, I obviously like don't think this stuff is good. And I report on it because I don't think it's good and that people should pay attention to it.
For sure.
But there's a big difference between like coming at it from your perspective and, making stuff up or botching facts, which is something I don't do. So although my coverage has an angle on it, I, always promise that it's going to be accurate.
Right. It's like the difference between an editorial and just a fabrication type thing.
Right. You might disagree with my takeaway, but the information I'll show you in my reporting is accurate and confirmed.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, people get frustrated a lot. I think there's this sort of guys that like, oh, we have to like pretend to be totally neutral on everything. But I don't think. I think especially like in this new media age, like people aren't buying it anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it's more honest to just take an approach sort of like the way that I do, where it's like, of course I have opinions about this stuff. Like I'm human. When I when I see this, like I have an opinion, I make a judgment. But how much that taints your work or like leads you to make errors is a different question, and that is a legit question. But as long as you can make that split, I think.
Right. How long has Right Wing Watch been around?
Right Wing Watch has been around since, I believe, 2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been going on way longer than when I arrived at Right Wing Watch. It started as a blog during like the big blogosphere era of the internet, and then it got picked up by a progressive think tank called People for the American Way. And when I say picked up, I mean they, pay for it. And
okay, yeah,
but
fair enough.
But yeah, we operate independently from them.
I was first introduced to Right Wing Watch through podcasts that would take clips that somebody at Right Wing Watch had gone to the trouble of cutting out various segments, and they would play these clips and make fun of it. So that was where I first heard about Right Wing Watch, and it's like I could not believe that somebody spent the time having to watch all of these hours and hours of conservatives on YouTube and television and Fox News, and just like the patience required is amazing to me.
Yeah. And if you talk to a lot of people like myself included that are in this kind of line of work, a lot of us come from like very conservative environments. And I think like I was raised in a conservative household where Fox News was on. I grew up in Arkansas, which is, at this point, deep red. Right. And it's, I don't know, I guess I've just got a stomach for this stuff. So, but yeah, Right Wing Watch, like, for most of its existence, like really, would keep track with the religious right, especially like as it fought against stuff like marriage equality, as it, tries to go against abortion stuff, or, seeks to sort of murky the line, the separation between church and state.
Yeah.
And then when I came on, we started covering sort of this stuff, or I guess I started covering this stuff for them.
Right. Yeah. My background was in the atheist community for a long time.
Oh, cool.
And so that's kind of where I came into that, listening to atheist podcasts. And of course, it's easy to make fun of the religious right when you've got the clip right there that you can get at.
Yeah.
But so I guess kind of to transition a little bit into the current age, like what's going on with the religious right now, and how do they kind of compare to what we consider the mainstream right now?
I mean, the religious right, I feel like, what I cover, which is like the far right, and some of the more extreme stuff, that gets a lot of play because it's very pronounced on social media, and like every news person is on Twitter.
Right.
The religious right is not addicted to Twitter because they have, salvation in Christ, of course, but not. but they are still a political force to be reckoned with, and they have a major ally in the White House through Trump, who just needs somebody to back him up because he doesn't seem to really have a firm grasp on what he's doing. And then, Pence brings him the evangelical crowd. But white evangelicals are Trump's most loyal base. That's why, after he caved on the wall spending, what was that, last week? Last week?
Yeah.
Maybe a couple weeks
ago.
Yeah. But whenever he caved on that, like the next morning he gets on Twitter and is tweeting about like Bible classes in schools because like that is his loyal base. And if he's beholden to anybody like the most, it's this. So I think the religious right's, influence in the current administration is like what just massively underreported. But we're doing what we can over at Right Wing Watch still, and then I keep an eye on the Nazis to make sure they don't get too big.
Is there a connection between like the religious right and the Nazis?
I mean, for certain sections of it, and we can talk about this in a little bit, but the far right really exists on this like big spectrum. It's almost like a coalition. Like you think of like the progressive coalition, where it's like you've got some people who are gung-ho on environmental issues, you've got some people who are all about Wall Street regulation, but they all come together for like certain things.
Yeah.
There's a certain section of the far right that calls itself the trad right, standing for like traditionalist right.
Okay, yeah, that's where you get the trad wives and whatnot on YouTube.
Yep, yeah. So you're familiar. But for listeners that aren't familiar, it is like far right politics, and it focuses very heavy on religion, usually Catholicism, and it teaches young men and women to assume traditional societal roles where, it's a heterosexual relationship only. The man's the breadwinner. The woman is the stay-at-home wife, dressing very modestly. Sex is for children only, that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then, but the point of like that sector in far-right politics is because like they believe the white race is going through like a genocide or some shit, and the whole point of it is like you do this so you can maximize your production of like additional white babies. So
that's wild.
So like it seems like kooky and crazy, but like it folds into this like larger thing.
Right. I'm not sure. I want to ask about the white genocide, but I'm not sure how to start the question. Like, they actually believe that there's a genocide going on for white people?
Yeah. So, I mean, like in the United States, for example, studies have shown that, like, historically the United States has been a majority white country, and that is starting to shift. To where I think the prediction, I would have to look it up. I think it's something like within like a next generation of the population, there won't be a white supermajority in the United States anymore. And,
right.
If you believe white people are like the quote unquote master race or whatever, then that's a concern to you. I don't think most people care.
Right.
But they believe a lot of these folks take it a step further, and it's not just that like demographics are shifting and like that spells trouble or whatever. They think that this is done on purpose by leaders in the U.S. government and through immigration laws and stuff, because there's a secret globalist plot, whether you believe it's like George Soros or like whatever, to destroy America and destroy the West. And it's so
it's not even
there's levels of this stuff, but it can get pretty crazy.
It's not even just that they think that like people are moving to the United States or people of color are having children at rates that exceed those of white people. They think that somebody's doing this on purpose.
Yes.
It seems really wild.
It is. I mean, I can't tell you that it makes sense. I can just tell you what it is.
Yeah, I suppose. Wow. So who's kind of spreading these ideas?
A lot of it, I think probably like the biggest high profile name I would think of, or I'll just list some.
Sure.
You think it, I mean, this is, it dates back to people like Jared Taylor from American Renaissance, Richard Spencer from National Policy Institute, even though his time in the sun's kind of done.
Yeah.
You've got like a YouTube community that does this, forum boards like, ranging every place from like Stormfront to the Daily Stormer to, there's like race realism stuff. Stefan Molyneux a YouTuber has like a lot of these guys, if I talk to them, or they'll say on their podcast that like they got introduced to these ideas because Stefan Molyneux is a very big proponent of trying to argue that, like, people are, minorities are inferior to white people because their IQs are lower or something.
Right, yeah, he's very genetic IQ type guy.
Yeah.
And somehow IQ is like this ultimate number that can never be changed.
Exactly. It's like the only thing that would influence it would be like what ethnicity you are, when really there's like so many factors that are going into that. Yeah. And then there's the whole other thing about like whether IQ is even like a fair representation of somebody's practical intelligence, which
right, yeah.
But
it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, but guys like Molyneux are it's crazy that you have somebody who has last I checked like 900,000 YouTube subscribers.
Holy shit.
Just exposing them like in videos, like, that wow. I don't know. I met Molyneux one time, and he was telling me about his YouTube stats, and a lot of the people that watch his stuff, he's got something like a 70% or 80% like full watch rate, which on YouTube is insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's I don't know. That guy's wild.
Yeah, it seems like some of the worst right-wing, far-right people for down in the U.S. are actually Canadians.
I've noticed that too.
It's a very strange occurrence to me.
Yeah, and then there's a podcast network called The Right Stuff that is, very big in those communities.
Okay.
There's at its peak, I think the numbers have dropped a little bit, but at its peak, the website that hosted those podcasts was getting something like 2 million visitors a month.
Holy shit.
So how that translates into like who downloads the podcast or who listens on iTunes or whatever, like, well, they're not on iTunes. I think they're on Stitcher or something. I don't know. But like how that translates over to listens is kind of hard to tell unless I can get into the back end of what they have and see.
2 million visitors to their website is still enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And they have show titles like Fash the Nation.
Oh, no.
The Daily Shoah. Shoah is a Jewish word for Holocaust.
Okay, yeah.
So it's the Daily Holocaust.
Wow.
It's pretty intense stuff, and
no kidding.
And they don't hold it back. And they've got tons of listeners like that.
Wow. Is YouTube and podcasts, are those the main ways that they kind of spread their information now?
Now, they were on Twitter for a good while. On Facebook less, but they were very good at Twitter for a little bit. But then Twitter decided to start kicking them off, and they kind of freaked out a little bit. So it's definitely less pronounced now. Mostly you just have like trolls on there, but not really like huge names. But one place that they have been safe to stay on for the most part has been YouTube.
Okay.
And then they have their podcasting networks and whatnot. And I think they do that because enforcement on those platforms, whether it's like long video format or audio format, it's very hard for a site like YouTube, which has like tons of videos, content, or something like Stitcher, which has like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of audio content going up every day.
Yeah.
Unless somebody sits down and just listens to the whole thing, that's not like a reasonable ask. And
yeah. And it's pretty hard to monitor that way.
Yeah. So, a lot of them are able to, sort of roam freely on those platforms.
So I guess What are we kind of mentioned earlier, like kind of the spectrum of the far right? Like, what are the different types, I guess, of the far right?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'll start from like the less heinous, and then
Okay.
I'll stop on the really bad stuff. So
Okay.
the far right, as you would look at it, like, you know, and a lot of people in this category have like really cooled it on the rhetoric lately. I will say that, but
Okay.
I'm gonna sort of break it down based on like what was happening in like 2016, 2017 when people first got clued into this stuff. So in one class, you have a bundle of essentially just propagandists who use far-right ideology and conspiracy theories to bolster up a major presence on platforms like Twitter and YouTube and etc. And like that is the gateway to the mainstream. They have enough attention on them that if folks want to get one of their ideas into the mainstream, it can be distilled through, one of these folks into something a bit more palatable and then disseminated.
Okay.
You take a step over, you have like anti-immigrant folks. You've got, some of the more hardcore like anti-abortion stuff. A lot of this is like specific issue area folks.
Okay.
Moving further right, you have a collection of YouTubers, podcasters, sort of a group that is very image conscious. So they will often not just come straight forward and make racist statements and say stuff like, I hate all minorities. Like that's not something that you would find them on a show saying.
Right.
But they will say, but they will argue that like the demographics of a country is essentially like determines the success of that country. So they'll walk around saying that just like outright disgusting stuff.
Right.
Then you take a step over, and then those are all the guys that'll say the disgusting stuff. Those are folks like Chris Cantwell. They have smaller audiences because most people don't want to listen to that stuff.
Right.
But their audience is a lot more hardcore, and that's where you get people. That's where you get like into the area where you can start mobilizing people because they're devoted enough and they don't care if what people think of them. They'll just do it anyway.
Those are the guys chanting, "You will not replace us" in the streets.
Yeah. I mean, that specific instance, Unite the Right was like sort of a unique event that I don't think we're going to have an equivalent to any time in the near future, not to that scale. And I really hope I'm right. I don't. I don't want to be wrong on that.
No way.
But what was unique about that is that group of folks that have the bigger audiences that sort of argue for the same thing in a coded way.
Right.
And those guys that are just like, yeah, we don't care. We just like hate minorities and like wish they would all die. And they just say that openly. Like that big audience and those folks got in the same place. And that's why that was so violent and just absolutely chaotic. And then I guess on the furthest extreme, you have groups and these groups are very small, but they are dangerous. Stuff like Atomwaffen Division, stuff like the Base. These are groups usually less than 100 people, but they're groups that like actively train and prepare for what they believe to be a impending race war.
Oh, geez, wow.
So that's like the most extreme it gets. So all along the spectrum, you have these weird little subgroups and like niches. It's kind of like any other place on the internet, where cliques form and people become friends and start enjoying certain content together. But there's a few ones. There's the trad right. like we talked about earlier.
Right.
But there's also the Chad right, which is all about, focusing on your physical health and like going to the gym and stuff, which is something I can get behind. But then they pair it with like insane politics.
Right.
But my favorite, and it burned out. It was very quick and very small. Was the dog right?
The dog right.
Yeah. This happened like at the end of 2017 for a brief moment. Folks there was like a collection of folks online that got this idea that it's a bit ingenious, but it didn't really take off. They were like, okay, Unite the Right just happened. Like, people are terrified of us. Like, our movement just killed somebody, like, in a very public way. We need to, like, we can't stop getting the message out, but, like, we have to make it a little bit, easier to digest so people don't get scared. So they started making these Twitter accounts, and they would post out their messages, like anti-immigrant messages or anti-Muslim messages, and then they'd attach pictures of dogs to them. So people would click the post because they saw the dog, and then they'd get the propaganda. And it didn't take off, but I do remember that.
It's pretty sneaky.
Yeah, I was writing about sort of this fracturing stuff at the end of 2017 after Unite the Right, and I remember mentioning the dog right in that piece, and then my Twitter being flooded with all these like dog avatars that are like, "How dare you, sir? How dare you?"
The dog right didn't like that, eh?
No. It was not a good doggo or whatever kids are saying.
Yeah. It's interesting, the influence of YouTube on the far right. Like, there was a piece not that long ago, I guess maybe it's a year ago now, on Right Wing Watch about the influence of YouTube on right wing propaganda.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that
I remember that piece. I've never been harassed for something I've written as much as I have that piece.
Is that right?
Oh God, man, they
get a lot of Sargon of Akkad fans that didn't like that.
I mean, it was like everybody. I think like everyone in the political space on YouTube, which had mostly, gone on with like rare moments of criticism or like sort of sparing criticism, just got it all at once. And I think it was perceived in those communities as like, this is an attack on the community. If they'll do it to like these white nationalists over here, they'll do it to us next, which is like, I don't really have an interest in just like singling out random people, but
right.
But it's of course it's the conspiracy because the establishment media wants to take down the new media, and I don't know. I try to remind these people that like Right Wing Watch is not an establishment thing, and like we're not like MSNBC, we are a new media thing. We're a website.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, even the mainstream media is pretty nice to the Nazis and whatnot. Like, didn't the New York Times do like a puff piece personalized on a Nazi?
Oh, the Nazi next door.
Yeah.
Oh God, man, that piece.
Wow, eh? Like,
I get what they were trying to do with that piece, which is like drive the point home that like, oh, this isn't just like something that happened in Charlottesville or like. But that these people like exist everywhere and they're in your communities and blah blah blah. But like,
maybe they should have
the presentation on that could have.
They should have played it with ominous music in the background or something.
Yeah, I'll just say that is not how I would have done it. But
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So I guess last year we saw a couple like. Pretty violent kind of events from far right extremists, I would say. Do you think that this? I mean, when I talked to David Nyward, it seemed like it was kind of amping up to something. Do you see that kind of tapering off, or is it still building up?
I think it's still building up, and I think we're going to see more of it. To be frankly,
right?
I think we'll see. I would be surprised if we saw another humongous gathering like Unite the Right, this year. Unless something happens in the news or some major thing happens in this country that would encourage that sort of coalition to all come around in the same place again, as we record today, I don't think the climate, would be able to pull that off. But I think what we're going to see more of is these sort of small groups getting into acts of violence. Groups like on the West Coast, you have groups like Patriot Prayer, which, have these rallies. They're like small to medium-sized rallies. But the whole point of showing up to this stuff is just to like provoke Antifa or whatever and get into fistfights in the street. And then you have people that get radicalized. There was a Proud Boy that lives not too far from David, actually, that like put a sword through, I think it was his brother's head because he thought he was a lizard person or something.
Yeah.
This whole environment, and particularly on YouTube, but really just sort of like in certain places on the internet, that is built on this idea of red pilling somebody. Like when you exist in this alternate reality where like there's secret forces at work trying to like destroy you and destroy the country and destroy culture, like that does something to you. And I think like at the end of the day, like people either sort of taper off of this or they go into it. And if they go far enough into it, I think eventually that leads people to, have violent desires. And, of course, not everybody's going to act on that.
Right.
And people have, those kind of desires for, plenty of other reasons sometimes, but and they don't act on it. But I think occasionally you're going to get somebody who does. And, as more people, as that builds out and more people, start living in this sort of alternate reality, it's a numbers game.
Right. What do you think of the YouTube's new, policy against conspiracy videos? Do you think that that's going to have any impact on any of this?
I think it all depends on how they enforce it. My biggest sort of criticism of YouTube or just these large social media giants in general is, they put these rules on the book, but then when it comes to enforce them, they are all over the place. And, I think that even the people making these conspiracy videos have sort of the same complaint as I do,
right.
Which is that, like, you don't know where the lines actually are. It's just like, we don't allow conspiracy content. And it's like, well, is this conspiracy content? Is this conspiracy content? And it's like, the lines are drawn like arbitrarily,
Right.
And it's not consistent. There's not like that transparency and enforcement, which I think if the lines were drawn clearer and that transparency was there, I think, a lot of the criticisms that these companies face, like, would start to go away a little bit.
Yeah.
But and I have no clue why they don't do it, but that's, it's going to remain to be seen, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think, like, in the past, we've talked about conspiracies on Brainstorm and in the skeptical community in general. And, like, it is a thing where, like, a lot of times conspiracies have that grain of truth to them.
Right.
So then it makes it hard to say, well, this entire video is no good because it's a conspiracy, and they can go, well, but it's got this true thing in it.
Right. That's something that, aside from the, space lizard people shit that goes on at InfoWars, like, that's something that's like InfoWars' whole model is they take, like, a study, and, like, the study is real, and the study, like, makes the basic start claim, that they begin with, but then they just blow it up into something entirely.
Yeah.
Like the most famous Alex Jones rant about the chemicals in the water that turn the frogs gay.
Right.
Like that was actually based on a study that found that like because of like chemicals that had been dumped into the stream, the like frogs in that stream were attempting to like the male frogs were attempting to mate with other male frogs, like not seemingly like not aware that it wasn't another male frog. So like,
right.
So did pollution make the frog gay? Like, sort of, I guess, but like,
yeah, I suppose that's an interpretation one could make.
Yeah. But then if you're Alex Jones, you know, it's like, and this is the government doing this. They're going to do this to your kids. They're going to, you know, it just goes off on this other thing.
Right.
Entirely. Yeah, so where that line is, it's just like totally, I mean, who knows where they're going to draw that line.
Yeah.
And wherever they draw it, people are going to be mad. So.
Wow, that's just it, yeah. Something, yeah. So where does Alex Jones fall on the spectrum of the far right?
Oh, man. I like to think of him as his own creature, I think.
I think that's fair. He's kind of out there.
I mean, there's elements, I think, of like everything in him. There's like your classic conspiracy theorist, and then there's like every once in a while he says some stuff, like he's got the globalist conspiracy theories, which like came out of like white nationalist, like neo-Nazi circles, like way back in the day.
Right.
And like, so there's like elements of stuff. And I definitely think that like, you know, InfoWars will give like a nice wink in the nod to some of the more extreme stuff every once in a while to keep those audiences happy.
Right.
And like, because of that, they can be like a gateway into that. They've hosted white nationalists on their show, you know, that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's like entirely one specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of all over the place.
That's kind of the thing, is like whenever I do watch InfoWars, I really struggle to find it on YouTube nowadays. But when I do watch it, you know, I will say, out of everything I watch and listen to and, you know, keep tabs on, I cannot tell you, you know, what is going to happen when Alex Jones comes back from break in the next segment of the show. Like, it's
you don't know what he read, what he saw.
Yeah.
He could just go off, eh?
Right.
Is Fox News still as influential as they once were?
I think they're more influential. I don't know that Fox News is like as influential in sort of just like the general, you know, random conservative who's like getting most of their information online. But with TV audiences, they're still like the top cable news channel. Excuse me. But most importantly, there's a fellow, Matt Gertz. He works at Media Matters, where I used to work. But he's done fantastic work basically highlighting that Trump like gets his like so many of his tweet ideas from Fox News.
Right.
He just like watches a segment on Fox News, and if he thought it was good, he like tweets out the segment, and it's just like, love Fox News, guys. And he watches Fox and Friends every morning. They like are basically like making a show for the president to watch. So I think, you know, when it comes to just like your run-of-the-mill Trump supporter or whatever, I mean, they care about Fox News and what's going on, but it's not like, you know, that's what the Trump supporters think. But then, like, if you are Trump, you are hanging on to like everything that happens at Fox News and like looking to it for guidance. So, you know, how influential they are, I guess, depends.
It depends which.
Depends if you're the president or not. But
yeah, that's right. I wonder, because he used to watch Alex Jones too.
Yeah, I don't know how much he watched them personally, but he definitely paid attention to what was going on.
Yeah.
And, whenever he was campaigning and he went on InfoWars, he had, all kinds of nice things to say about Alex Jones, telling him that, we love you, we're counting on you, that sort of stuff.
Right. That's pretty concerning. The president is a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, but we all knew this going in.
That's true. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess, I don't know. Is there hope? Is there any way to get rid of, kind of defeat the far right or kind of educate people out of these kind of ideologies?
That's something I think about a lot is, the far right political scene in the U.S., if you look at it, on a timeline, it sort of comes in and out like the tide at the beach.
Okay.
It kind of goes in and out of fashion. It has moments where it gets some success and can build its numbers, and then it sort of dwindles down a little bit.
Right.
But, these ideas in politics won't, they're ideas. You can't make an idea go away.
Yeah.
But what you can control is whether you entertain that idea or not, or, if you want to debunk it or put out proof that it's not real. And, I guess as far as the broader political scene, the conservative, movement has kind of shifted further right pretty aggressively. But I think it's probably less to do with, thinking that white genocide is happening, and more of just when you dump, conspiracy theories and, this sort of scaremongering stuff into, the conservative voters' head, it's much easier to justify authoritarian, control in government. Because when the people are scared, they want the strong man to come up and tell them that they're going to fix it. So, I do, kind of worry about the direction this is going. But I think it's going to take, at least when it comes to government stuff, it's going to take people voting to fix it,
right.
To change the course. Whether that's going to happen, whether the Democratic Party can get their act together enough to try to do something in 2020.
Got some good candidates going now.
Yeah.
Into the primary. So
yeah, we've got a few. That seem promising. My philosophy is that I support policies, not candidates.
Right.
But if they can pull it together, they can maybe shift the conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to get probably a little bit worse before it gets better.
That's not good.
Yeah. People like to say that we're headed towards Idiocracy. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
I usually argue back that we've been there for a little bit and we're just waking up to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It seems for the first year of Trump's presidency, it seemed almost surreal in a lot of ways. And then, of course, you had Charlottesville and what appeared to me to be this extremism just blowing up online all of a sudden. And it all seemed very surreal. And now I'm kind of settling into this is the way the world is now.
Yeah, so. They got a major win on the internet, especially in young audiences, which is if again, looking at white nationalism stuff on a historical timeline, the numbers they've got of old people, of teenage Twitch stream gamer type people that get into it ironically and then slowly get red pilled or whatever is right. Honest to God, flabbergasting. Because as David, would tell you, back in the day, like these movements relied on passing out pamphlets or hanging out flyers and stuff. But now they have the digital, equivalent of a pamphlet and flyer, but you can reach like a seemingly infinite amount of people not constrained by geographic location.
Right.
So, it's crazy.
I guess, I guess something I wanted to ask you about actually is about you recently wrote about PewDiePie.
Oh God.
and I know my son, he doesn't watch PewDiePie, but he watches other YouTubers who game online, and like I guess maybe it's the link between gamer culture and the far right. Like what happened there?
I mean, the far right, when they sort of made their debut and they were like trying to get into the cool kids club on the internet, one of the first places they started for was the like fallout of the Gamergate crowd.
Right.
Gamergate, you'll remember. So I think it was like late 2014, 2015-ish. It was about ethics in gaming journalism, quote unquote, but quickly became about like, railing against the SJWs and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
and
definitely lots of anti-feminism, right?
Yeah, I mean, it started as that, and then there was like the men's right activist folks that like got in on that, and then these far right people, saw a bunch of angry white men, to be straight up, and decided that these angry white men were going to be the perfect place for them to start trying to drop little nuggets and get them over to their side. And they had, again, it's like looking at this historical scale, this is like flabbergasting success.
Wow.
And I don't know what I don't know that there's just like one reason for that link. When it comes to PewDiePie in specific, I don't think that he like holds any of these views, or really. I think that, in that case specifically, I think it was just like him thinking that like Nazi jokes are edgy and funny, because he just like, from where he's at and his perspective, he just like doesn't understand that this stuff can have really serious effects, or that he is the biggest content creator on YouTube, and that, like he needs to, I don't know why he feels like he doesn't need to do the minimal amount of research on people, and like before he tells his audience of 70 million subscribers, hey, you should follow this guy.
Right.
It's that situation I was sort of like its own thing, and it got mischaracterized by a lot of people, I thought. But that link is real. I think gamers like to be edgy. It's sort of like the community sense of humor is just to be like outrageous and edgy. And I think Nazi jokes are pretty edgy. You think of like
I guess if that's your goal, hey.
Yeah, if you're just trying to say something shocking, I guess some Nazi stuff would be right in that mix. But I guess it's just the thing of like when you can be joking, but like if you say it enough times, like are you at what point are you not joking anymore, and what point does that like start to seep into your frame of mind and like understanding of the world?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a lot of people think of like the SJWs as having no sense of humor or whatever because of their aversion to these kind of jokes about Nazis type jokes. But I think there is something to the idea that if you make jokes about killing people or you use the N-word a whole bunch, like this sort of stuff, it does get into your head and you think that that's like normal.
Yeah. And also like these type of jokes, like the butt of the joke is, communities that do pose like real threats from, exactly what the punchline of the joke is. So
Right.
it makes sense that, like, if you're a woman or if you're, belong to a minority community, that, like, you wouldn't think violent Nazi jokes are funny because, you watch people in your community, like, come under attack by these groups all the time.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me why people would, get upset over that. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of that criticism is misplaced. And, that whole, like, anti-SJW trend on YouTube, like, seemed to just entirely rely of, like, picking up videos of people on college campuses just, like, going about it in the wrong way and just, like, having, like, breakdowns and screaming in the middle of, like, lectures and stuff. And
and without context often.
right. It's just like, it's, it was just like a caricature. It wasn't really representative of anything. It was just like this attempt to take, like, a legit criticism, and then when somebody, like, got too worked up about it, use the fact they got worked up about it to completely, absolve any responsibility of responding to that criticism.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think this is as good a place as any to end the main interview. Where can people find more information about you or more of your writing?
You can follow me on Twitter at Jared L. Holt. That's just the letter L. And I write full-time for Right Wing Watch. Our site is rightwingwatch.org, and we are also on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me, and
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
If you like what we're doing and want to help us keep the lights on, go become a patron at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. You can hear the bonus half hour that we record every episode and get a shout out when you support the show. Become a patron for just $1 an episode at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. Or you can support the show by ordering a t-shirt, mug or other gear from our store at caffeepress.ca/Brainstorm Podcast Gear. If you can't afford to become a patron or buy gear, then why not give us a rating or write a review on iTunes or Stitcher? Every rating makes it easier for people to find us. Thanks for your support.
all right, that's all you get. Jared and I talked for an extra 20 or 30 minutes for patrons only. This is, I think, a format that's easy for me to maintain. I don't want to cut off regular listeners from the main content of an interview, but I still want to provide something extra for patrons. Plus, then we can be a bit more candid when the audience is more limited. So I'm always going to try and get these extra few 20-minute, 30-minute conversations after the main interview for patrons. And you can get that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. For all the other things, check out the show notes at brainstormblog.net and on our Libsyn provided site, thebrainstormpodcast.com. Thanks to our financial supporters, Driffa, Kayla, Kim, Stephanie, Zach, the Utah Outcasts, Aaron, Daryl, Bob Glenn, Destin Doesn't Suck That Much, Magnus, several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave, Positively Skeptical, Rob, the Podunk Polymath, the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Sauce Be Upon Him, Freethinker215, and Larry. If you want to help join them and help the show grow, then you can do that at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. Or go buy some stuff at tpublic.com/stores/brainstorm-podcast-gear. And of course, you can always give us a little bit of extra money at paypal.me/brainstormpodcast. I want to give a big thanks to Jared Holt for joining me. You can find more of his stuff at rightwingwatch.org, and you can find his podcast at shtpostpodcast.wordpress.com. So make sure to check that out. Thanks to Dave for our intro music. Thanks to Aaron Rabbi from Embrace the Void for doing the voiceover for our intro. You can find his stuff at voidpod.com. Thanks to Alex Kepper Murdoch for doing the voiceover for our ads, and thanks to Jason Camo for our outro music. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. All music played is either with permission or under the SOCAN license to play. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info page on our website, brainstormblog.net. Remember to give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a fave on your podcatcher of choice. Join our Facebook group, like our page, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our subreddit, sign up for our newsletter, share the show, and spread the word. The more you share, comment, and like our stuff, the more it helps the show grow. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters.